All right, welcome to this explainer. We're diving into one of the biggest questions out there. Can we prove God exists just by looking at the world around us? If you're revising for your OCR A Level exams, stick around because we're going to cover everything you need to know about the arguments from observation.
For centuries, philosophers have looked at the universe from the complexity of a human eye to the sheer scale of the cosmos, and they've debated this exact question. Are these clues left by a divine creator, or is there another explanation for it all? So let's get into it and break down the classic arguments.
Okay, so here's the game plan. We'll kick things off by exploring two major arguments for God that are based on observation. Then we'll bring in the heavy-hitting critics who really challenge them. And finally, we'll wrap it all up, giving you the tools you need to evaluate these ideas for those all-important AO2 marks.
Right. We're starting with a posteriori arguments. Now, this is a key bit of jargon you've got to know. But don't worry, it's pretty simple. All it really means is arguments that are based on our experience and evidence of the world, things we can see and touch, rather than just abstract logic.
So these arguments from observation, they basically split into two big ideas we're going to look at. First, you've got the teleological argument, which looks for clues in the apparent design and purpose of the world. And second, there's the cosmological argument, which focuses on cause and effect to explain why the universe exists at all. First up, the teleological argument. This one's championed by some major thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and William Paley. It's a real classic argument from design, and you'll definitely need to get your head around this one for the exam.
Right, so the key word here is telos. It's a Greek word that means purpose or goal. And pretty much the whole argument hangs on this one idea, that when we see things in nature that seem to be working towards a goal, there must have been some kind of a purposer that set it up that way. So Thomas Aquinas, in his famous Fifth Way, comes up with this brilliant analogy. Think about it. An arrow doesn't just fly to a target all by itself, right? It needs an intelligent archer to aim it and let it go. Aquinas says it's the same for things in nature. A seed growing into a tree is acting for an end, and so it must be guided by an intelligent being, and that, for him, is God.
Okay, so fast forward a few centuries, and William Paley comes along with his super famous watchmaker analogy. Picture this. You're walking through an empty field, and you stumble upon a complex watch lying on the ground. You'd never think its intricate gears and springs just randomly appeared. No way. You'd know instantly that a watchmaker must have designed it for a purpose. So Paley's logic is actually pretty straightforward. He says, just like the watch points to a watchmaker, when we look at something far more complex in nature, like the human eye, which is perfectly suited for seeing, we should conclude that it must have had a divine designer too. That's the core of his argument. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the cosmological argument. This one isn't so much about the design inside the universe, it's about a bigger question, the very existence of the universe itself. Why is there something here at all, instead of just nothing? So Aquinas actually gives us three versions of this, his first three ways. He argues that anything that's moving must have been moved by something else. Every effect we see must have had a cause, and anything that's contingent, meaning it could have not existed, must ultimately depend on a necessary being that just has to exist.
Now, this is a really key point. Aquinas totally rejects the idea of an infinite regress. He's saying you can't have a chain of causes that goes back forever and ever with no start. Think of it like a line of dominoes. For the last domino to fall, the first one had to be pushed. For Aquinas, that first mover, that first cause, that necessary being, is God.
But, of course, these arguments didn't just get a free pass. They were heavily criticized. And for your AO2, this is where the real marks are, in understanding the debate. So let's bring on the critics, starting with the great skeptic, David Hume. Hume comes in and just lands some powerful blows on the design argument. He's like, hold on, look at all the flaws in the world. Earthquakes, disease, animal suffering. What does that say about your so-called perfect designer? He sarcastically suggests maybe the world wasn't made by a perfect God, but by some clumsy infant deity who messed it up. This is a brilliant use of the problem of evil. Hume doesn't stop there. He also attacks the very logic of these arguments with something called the fallacy of composition. And this is a really clever critique because you can use it against both the design argument and the first cause argument. Basically, he says you can't just assume that because everything inside the universe has a cause, the universe as a whole must have one single cause. Here's an easy way to think about it. Just because every brick in a wall is small, it doesn't mean the whole wall is small. You're making a logical leap that might not be justified.
But maybe the biggest challenge, especially for Paley's design argument, came from science and a guy called Charles Darwin. His theory of evolution gave us a completely different way to explain why nature looks like it's been designed, based on observations like these famous finches.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Evolution, as Richard Dawkins famously put it, acts like a blind watchmaker. It's a process with no goal or plan. Random changes happen in an organism's DNA. If a change helps it survive, it gets passed on. Over millions of years, this process of natural selection can build incredibly complex things that look like they were designed, but with no designer needed. Okay, so after all that, where does that leave us? For your exam, the whole point is to weigh these ideas against each other. So let's break down the strengths and weaknesses you can use for your AO2 evaluation. This is absolutely key for hitting those top grades. So let's look at the teleological argument first. On the plus side, it's really intuitive, right? We see what looks like design, so we think designer. And modern ideas like the anthropic principle, which says the universe is perfectly fine-tuned for life, give it a bit of a boost. But the weaknesses are huge. You've got evolution as an alternative, Hume's point about a flawed world, and that powerful fallacy of composition critique.
Now for the cosmological argument. Its big strength is that it tackles that massive question of existence, and it's based on our everyday experience of cause and effect. But the critics fire back. Why can't the universe just be the necessary thing that exists on its own? And is an infinite regress really impossible? Plus, even if there is a first cause, it's a massive leap to say that cause is the all-powerful, all-loving God people pray to.
Okay, so for your exams, this is the absolute key takeaway. AO1 is the what. It's just explaining Paley's watch analogy or listing Aquinas' 3 ways. You're showing you know the stuff. AO2 is the so what. It's the analysis, the evaluation. It's using Hume to pick apart Paley's argument or questioning whether Aquinas' logic holds up. It's about making these ideas talk to each other. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. Science, from the Big Bang Theory to evolution, has given us some incredible explanations for how our universe works. But have these old philosophical arguments lost their power to ask why? In an age of quantum physics, is there still a place for a first cause or a divine designer? Well, that's for you to argue.